Hey up everybody, welcome back to the Audi Cycling YouTube channel, where today I'm very happy to say that I'm going to be doing a preview for the Santos Tour Down Under. We've had 2 years off of this race and I'm super happy to say that it is back, and yeah, it's just the thing that fulfills my January. So let's go and have a look firstly at the stages, and then I'll talk also about who I think might win each stage. And then I'll get more into the favourites after that. And I'll try and remember to timestamp that stuff down below as well to try and make it easier for you guys to navigate through. So for the first time in a few years, actually, we've got a prologue in the Tour Down Under. And we're starting off with it. It's 6 kilometres long. And this will provide a bit of a gauge as to who's going to be the main contenders for the GC at the end of this. At the end of the day, the Tour Down Under is largely won for a few seconds, especially since this year does not include the classic Willunga Hill that Richie Porte is very well known for winning up many times. So a prologue is going to provide us with a little bit of a yardstick as to who's going to be really the main contenders. I think that we've got some very strong guys here who are prologue riders, including guys like Ethan Hayter and Rowan Dennis, both of whom did a very strong prologue at the Tour of Romandy last year over a 5 kilometre prologue. This one's 6 kilometres, so we can draw a pretty strong comparison between the two. Ethan Hayter put the likes of 20 seconds into riders like Ben O'Connor, for example, so I'd expect those pure climbers to be losing somewhere around 20 seconds. But then guys like Geraint Thomas, for example, only lost, say, 10 seconds. So did Schachmann and Maro Schmidt, for example. So there's plenty of guys who I think who could do well. I think that Hayter and Rowan Dennis are the main candidates for the win here. However, there are some other strong guys in the Ineos lineup, including Magnus Sheffield and also Luke Plapp, who could really try and shake things up. Some other guys could include Michael Matthews. He has done some good prologues in the past. However, I'm not too sure if he still has that capability now. Geraint Thomas, of course, would be another strong one who could post a good result. Alberto Bettiol would probably be the last rider I'd expect to try and maybe shake up the apple cart a bit on stage. Well, stage is a prologue, so it doesn't technically count as a stage. Stage 1 is going to be this lap circuit. It's not overly long, it's 150 kilometres, and that is a bit of a theme. These stages are relatively short because of the Australian heat. It makes a lot of sense that we need to kind of, look after the rider's health. And the laps contain a 4.5 kilometre climb, which averages 3.7%. However, the last 0.5 kilometres of each of those climbs averages 7%. So it's going to be quite an attritional battle here. However, I don't think this will really weed out the likes of an Ethan Hayter or a Michael Matthews in the finale here. So I think that those two will be very strong favourites going into this, especially when you consider the strength of Ineos, for example. They do have a very strong team able to hold the race together for a sprint at the end, and I think that them and Team Jayco together would form a very strong force. Of course, there'll be the kind of usual breakaway up the road trying to snap up those breakaway points. Some other kind of punchers or sprinters who can climb in the race. Maybe someone like Phil Bauhaus could get over here. Brian Cockard would be a very strong candidate as well, including Caden Groves. Groves, who proved that he could climb very well last year in races like Volta Catalunya. And some other riders, perhaps someone like Corbin Strong for Israel. He showed that last year he could be a very strong candidate. And let's see whether Caleb Ewan can also do something in this race. He does ride for the Uni SA Australia team, so he doesn't have quite the backing of his Lotto Destiny team. But let's see whether that team can pull together and get Caleb Ewan a result on this stage. I'm not really sure who would win this. I think it's a very open stage, so we'll have to wait and see. Stage 2 provides something very similar, finishing in Victor Harbour. Last time we were finishing in Victor Harbour, it was Giacomo Nizzolo who won ahead of, I think it was Consonni and also Sam Bennett, which shows that sprinters can certainly still win in this scenario, even though there is a 2 kilometre climb which averages 7.8%. Very close to the finish line. It is quite a lumpy day, so it will probably take the sting out of a lot of those pure sprinters' legs. I'm not sure the likes of a Jordi Meus would make it into the finale here. But once again, you're looking at the likes of Michael Matthews and Ethan Hayter to be taking the win here. So I think it'll likely be up to those two to really try and pick up some bonus seconds to try and get a bit of a buffer on the pure GC riders ahead of some of the trickier stages, including This won stage 3, which starts off with roughly a 10-kilometre climb at 4%. You also got the corkscrew climb very close to the finish line. It's a descent all the way to the finish. And this will be the big test for the likes of Matthews and Hayter in my eyes, because it's 2.4 kilometres at 9%. Last time we were here, Daryl Impey took the win, and I expect a very similar rider to take the win again here, unless the GC riders really decide to light it up. I don't really see a team here which is capable of lighting up that climb unless your name is Ineos Grenadiers. However, they would likely want to control the pace to try and keep Hayter in there. I'd say that UAE provide the biggest threat with the likes of Jay Vine, George Bennett, Mark Hershey, Bax, Covey. They would all provide a very strong pace set on that climb. I think more than likely for Jay Vine would be their chosen man. But you could also see somebody attacking a bit early, somebody like Jai Hindley, somebody like Ben O'Connor, Simon Yates possibly if Michael Matthews isn't on a very good day, Pale Bilbao. I think that you'll see probably the person who wins this will be from a group of about 20, and I expect somebody like Alberto Bettiol to probably win here. We saw that he is pretty fast in a sprint. We saw that at the Tour de Suisse last year when he thought that he won, but when he was behind Andreas Leknesund, he won from that small sprint, and I think that if he could do something like that again, he'd be a very strong candidate for the win. But also look out for guys like Mauro Schmidt in there as well. I think that he would be a very strong candidate for the win as well going into Campbelltown. Stage 4, we're finishing up a slight drag into Willunga. It's going to be a 1 kilometre at 3% climb up to the finish. The rest of the stage is pretty uneventful, and I think that more than likely, again, this looks like a Corbin Strong, Ethan Hayter, Michael Matthews sort of esque stage, and I expect probably those guys to be the main protagonists again. I think this race is very suited towards those sorts of riders, and trying to create a bit of excitement between those guys getting bonus seconds but being dropped on the climbs to try and see if they can create a little bit of excitement around the GC in that sense. So I expect those punchers to really be contesting stage 4, and then stage 5 I would say probably on the cusp for Hayter and Matthews. It is the biggest GC opportunity of the week, with multiple ascents of Mount Lofty. There's 1.5 kilometres at roughly 7% at the end of this climb, and whether you will see Hayter and Matthews being able to hang on in this, I'm not really too sure. I think that it's very possible that with the amount of altitude that we're going to be going in this stage, it could be a bit difficult for them, and could therefore be one for the pure GC riders. If Hayter were to drop, Ineos have multiple options again in somebody like Luke Plapp. I think would be a very strong candidate here. It would be great to see Ineos really working for him, especially since this is going to be his home race, and especially since he worked so tirelessly for lots of teammates last year in the 2022 season. It would be good to see if Plapp was worked for. But again, you got some very strong riders, guys like Hindley and Bettiol and Schmidt, Storer, Tesfazion, Bilbao, Luis Leon Sanchez, Ben O'Connor, Simon Yates, all probably wanting to try and get Hayter outside the back door. I think it's going to be really tricky to predict who's going to be going to win here, just because it all depends upon what Ineos do, in my eyes. However, if I was to put my finger on a name, I would be tempted to say Mauro Schmidt, just because I like his fast finish, and I think that he probably provides the most dangerous threat from that new Soudal Quick-Step team, especially since they've got quite an open team for him to be able to try and play his own card. In my eyes, in terms of the GC favourites for this race, as I said before, I think it'll likely lie upon someone who can do a good prologue, but can also climb relatively well, and most importantly pick up bonus seconds in some of the sprints, because this is a race which largely comes down to bonus seconds. Just ask Daryl Impey that. I mean, he's won this race because of those before, which is why I favour guys like Hayter and Matthews perhaps for this race, but also somebody like Rowan Dennis. Although he isn't the fastest of finishers, he is relatively fast in a sprint, and perhaps on that Mount Lofty stage could provide a bit of a threat. He is a very strong prologue as well, and the whole team seems to be focused around him. He does seem to do quite well when it comes to the Tour Down Under when you look at his PCS stats. Perhaps Bilbao as well. He showed at Tour of the Alps last year that he is very strong from a reduced sprint as well. So I'd be expecting all those guys to be up there. Just one more final note, look out for this Paul Penoe, a rider for Groupama FDJ. He steps up from their fantastic Continental team. He's a relatively fast sprinter, probably more of like a puncher, Alaphilippe-esque style. I'll be looking out for him. He looks to be the fastest finisher for that Groupama team. Just somebody to put a bookmark onto for when you're watching the race. For me, in terms of my predictions as to who I think is going to finish on the podium, with third place, I think I'm going to go with Max Schachmann, because he's got the time trial, the climbing, and also a little bit of a sprint where if he doesn't DNF the race, which he has been prone to be doing in some races last year, then I think he'd be a very strong candidate for the podium, so I'll go with him in third place. In second place, Alberto Bettiol. He tends to go relatively well at the start of the season if you look back to some of his Etoile de Bessage performances in the last few years. He is usually pretty hot out of the blocks, so I'd expect Bettiol to finish in second place with a relatively fast finish and a decent prologue. And also, no surprise, I think that in first place will be Ethan Hayter for the Ineos Grenadiers. Of course, you could swap and change a few Ineos Grenadiers out of there, but I think realistically, Ethan Hayter provides the best chance for the Ineos Grenadiers because he has the fastest sprint, a good prologue, and as long as he can get over that corkscrew climb, I think that he is going to be pretty golden and quite unbeatable in this race. But put in the comments down below whether you agree with that. Do you think that I'm overlooking somebody? Are some of these stages a lot harder than I'm making them out to be? Be sure to put all of your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I'll be sure to read them all. And thank you all for watching the preview. That's all I have to say. See you in the next video. Salut!